Hey, good evening. If you are just joining us this evening for tonight's live YouTube chat and presentation about the Lockport Township High School District 205, March 19th referendum on Central Campus, you are in the right place. It's about 6:57. Thanks for hanging out with us. As we get closer to 7, I'll just make a few announcements so that people know we're here. We'll eventually turn it on live. But as you know, with so many of these things, we want to give people just a few minutes to get in, to get on, and get into the presentation. So we might officially start a little bit closer to 7:01, 7:02, just giving people a chance to get onto YouTube and get with us. So in advance, Dr. Bob McBride here. Thank you so much for joining us. And if I could just ask your patience for a few more minutes, that would be great. Thank you. Hey, good evening. Dr. Bob McBride again, Superintendent Lockport Township High School District 205. Just want to let you know that if you're on the YouTube channel and you hear my voice, you are in the right place for tonight's live presentation of our referendum information presentation on the March 19th referendum on Central Campus, renovating and preserving it. If you are on YouTube, you'll see that the comments are open. That is a great place for you to put a question. We already have our first question, and we will try to keep up with those questions and at the end of the presentation, answer them. I'm going to give it, before I pop on live, I'm going to give it about 2 more minutes, about 7:02, start the presentation then, just give enough people a chance just to get on, get into YouTube. But if you have a question that you'd like to ask, now's maybe a good time to do that, just write in the comments. So thanks for your patience. Thanks for letting some of our neighbors and community members hop on. I'll probably jump into it at 7:02. Thank you. Hey, good evening. My name is Dr. Bob McBride, Superintendent of Lockport Township High School, District 205, and I really appreciate the time that you're going to give this evening just to listening to the information presentation that we're doing about the Lockport Township High School District 205 Board of Education March 19th bond referendum to renovate and preserve Lockport Central, a 114-year-old building in our community. First, let me just give you a couple rules of the road here, how this is going to work tonight. I'm going to roll through the presentation. Usually I'm in front of a live audience with lots of questions, but in this particular case, we're going to use those YouTube comments. You'll see the comments on your right-hand side where you can put your questions in as we go along. Really, I hope tonight to give most of the time between 7 o'clock and 8 p.m. up to your questions and answering as many of them as I can. Any leftover questions, we'll be formulating a frequently asked question and answering them. Just so you know who in the room is answering your questions, we've got a crack panel here of administrators who are moderating and monitoring your questions. They'll be sharing questions with me. You'll hear them call them out to me when we get a chance to answer them. Thanks so much. Also, I would just ask if you could use some decorum, as you ask questions. The intention of those questions is really to illuminate this presentation, take us deeper as a community for a really important choice that we are asking you to make in terms of future facilities for our students. As I get into this presentation, a couple important things just overall that I would like to share with you as I try to tell the story of what has led us to this moment and what is going to be on the ballot. First and foremost, what is going to be on the ballot? When you walk into the voting booth on March 19th, you will see a question that is a legal question, has to be framed that way. In the state of Illinois, we cannot offer multiple choice ballot questions, but it will be a complex question. It will ask you two things in one question. First, do you, as citizens, want to renovate and preserve Lockport Central? And then second, do you want to authorize the Lockport Township High School District 205 Board of Education to finance that renovation, which we estimate will cost $85 million if done fully and if done properly? The ballot has to read like that, and the Board of Education can only offer you in a referendum one choice. Also, I just want to take a pause about what is a bond referendum. Municipal bonds are the way that public bodies finance large facility projects like the one that we are proposing. Probably like you, I've never bought a home with cash or added an addition on my house with cash. That's a little too rich for me. So I've used a bank to finance it. That's really what we are proposing here, is that we finance through bonds a loan $85 million that would take us through a full renovation project that I'll tell you a little bit more about in this presentation. So where does the taxpayer come in? Well, if we take out that 25-year mortgage, it's one way to think about it, every year we have to make payments in order to pay the balance and interest on those bond payments. We're proposing over 25 years. That increase, that payment, that additional payment that we'll pick up becomes part of our annual levy. And then ultimately, that levy is what we use to provide property taxes and raise the funds necessary both to operate school and then to pay our debt. So really what the board is offering is a financing option over a long period of time, 25 years. So let's get into the presentation and talk a little bit about what we've been working on. First, I just want to take you through the preparation and research that led into this. This really started for us in the near future in 2020, but it started much longer ago for the community. Many of you might know that in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2011, the district really took a look at the aging of Central and offered the community the option of new construction. 6 times the community rejected new construction at a property that we own in Homer Glen at 159th and Cedar Road. There were different options in those years. One option was to build a brand new 9th grade through 12th grade high school that would be about 471,000 square feet. There was also a proposal to have a smaller building, possibly a freshman-sophomore building or a freshman-only building, at 220 square feet, 220,000 square feet, excuse me. To give you a comparison, Lockport Central itself is 216,000 square feet, but 6 times that referendum ballot measure was defeated by the community. So in 2020, when we began rethinking about this and looking at Central, we knew that, and we looked carefully at the reasons why possibly those ballot referendums failed. We started in 2020 with a structural assessment. You can look at that online on our webpage, with structural engineers really looking at the outside shell of the building. Are the walls, is the ceiling, is the foundation, is this a sound structure? The conclusion of that is, yes, it is a sound structure. However, our structural engineers indicated about $500,000 worth of work that they recommended we do, and we did that. But they also noticed that there are many systems inside the building that could potentially fail and cause the building to be uninhabitable. We never expected that ceilings would be one of the systems that would fail, but that did happen. So in 2021, we completed all of the recommended renovations, remodelings, life safety repairs. In 2022, we did what's called a demographic projection. And what that does is it looks at our student population over the next 10 years. How big would our district be in 2032? The demographer that we hired looked primarily at housing and the patterns of sales of homes and who would be selling homes and who would move into those homes. His conclusion, McKibben Demographics, was that we wouldn't drop in population, but we wouldn't soar in population. We would really stay just about the same, dropping down to about 3,600 by 2027, 2028, bouncing back to about 4,200 by 2032. Just recently at a board meeting, we used a different method, something called cohort regression, and that model of looking at population had a similar conclusion. Keeping that in mind was very important to our board because when they were thinking about what to offer and how to look at our facilities issues, our board knew that we wouldn't be growing, we wouldn't be shrinking, we'd be staying fairly steady. And what does that exactly mean in our district? In 2023, we also did a traffic study here at East Campus. Many, many recommendations. We haven't put all those recommendations into place, but one recommendation is that bounded by 2-lane roads all the way around, not a great idea to bring more population to this campus. So these are all the type of things that we looked at in order to set a context of research on what to do moving forward. Then we began looking at options. We studied many, many options. And what we did in August of 2022 is we put together a Central Citizens Advisory Committee to advise the Board of Education on how to move forward. This was comprised of educators from our feeder districts, many people with architectural or construction, and we spent a whole year with that group working to understand where should we go next. Ultimately, that group, after meeting, after touring, after going to some other schools that had been renovated, advised our board that yes, Lockport Central is worth renovating and worth preserving. But they also dealt with the question of, do we do the minimum, just the life safety, the infrastructure, the heating and cooling, the electricity, the roof, do we just do that? Or do we also do some more major classroom and facility remodeling? Their logic was that if we're really tearing up the building, doing major things with heating and cooling, for example, we're already remodeling and we should do a proper and a full renovation of the building. So in 2023, starting in February, March, April of 2023, we started workshops and surveys of staff, of parents, of students even, to talk about, with all of those stakeholders, what would be possible at Lockport Central. 2023, in the spring and in the summer, we did tours. We wanted citizens to come in. We're doing those tours again now, every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. We had almost 500 people go through Lockport Central and see it for themselves. Finally, in August 2023, we had a conceptual presentation from DLA architects to our Board of Education to begin thinking about what could be possible for the future of Central. How could we pair a infrastructure renovation with a classroom modernization and remodeling, and a total preservation of a 114-year-old building. That's when we really started to narrow the scope on things. In September 2023, our architects made the very first public presentation of the concept that they had created. Our board came back in October and asked those architects to tighten the finances. They were concerned about the burden on you, taxpayers. In November, we took a look at some comparisons. We looked at what would be a proposed renovation of Central, $85 million. What would a new freshman building cost us, $145 million in today's dollars? What would a brand new high school cost us? $180 million in today's costs. Ultimately, the board on November 20th decided that the leaner, clearer, simpler, and easier on taxpayers option of an $85 million renovation was the one that they could endorse. To kind of take you through that a little bit more in depth, we did go through all of 2023, a master planning process to engage stakeholders, to identify challenges, to review facilities, to present solutions. We did workshops with citizens, with staff members, with students. We did surveys. We had community engagement asking people's input. We came up with strengths, options, weaknesses in terms of Central Campus. We identified the following challenges and opportunities at Lockport Central. Small classrooms, for example. Most modern classrooms are about 800 square feet. Our classrooms are about 500 square feet. In active, collaborative classrooms, especially like science classrooms, that can be difficult. Cramped hallways, our departments were spread out all over the building. We had accessibility issues with the Americans with Disability Act, and we've received many questions about that. And when you have a building that is the vintage of Lockport Central, you are not required to come into 100% compliance with the Americans with Disability Act until you renovate the structure. So right now, we only provide the minimum of accessibility. Part of this plan is to provide as much accessibility as we can. Elevator access, toilet safety. Modern high school bathrooms are built to be spacious, to be open, really, to be honest with you, not only appealing, but also safe, so that students are not doing things in washrooms that we wish that they were not doing. HVAC comfort, that was an issue. We do have in-the-wall air conditioning units in all of our classrooms, but having central air and central air conditioning is not just a creature comfort. Those in-the-wall units solve a problem. They cool classrooms. Many of you know we had temperatures between 100 and 110 degrees this year. That is a comfort issue, but more importantly, those in-the-wall units, they create incredible condensation and moisture. That overall condensation and moisture and the lack of our ability to control the temperature when it's hot, when it's cold inside the building, creates wear and tear over time on the building that can really erode the length and the duration of the usability of that building. So it has to do with structure. More secure entrance than we have now, preserving rich history, and the need for gathering spaces for our students. We lack that. So we approach this with two solutions. Solution one, and obviously the most important, you would have to do, it's a must do, are infrastructure improvements. The picture that you're seeing on your screen is the installation of a new chiller that we did 2 summers ago at East Campus. But then also remodeling and improving classrooms, modernizing those classrooms. The picture you're seeing here is some renovation that we did to modernize the library, the port at East Campus. So a two-prong approach. Most of the major infrastructure comes off of our 10-year infrastructure and life safety study that DLA Architects is always completing and updating for us. Some of the infrastructure improvements that we're talking about, window replacement to increase the efficiency of the building and the heating and cooling. Roof replacement. The roof has not been replaced since the 1980s. Masonry restoration to make sure all the masonry and tuck point is complete, up to date, and in good shape. Coming into code compliance with things like sprinkler systems, better ADA compliance, a better fire alarm system, HVAC replacement to create that static and controllable climate inside of the building, Elevator modernization, again, to help with Americans with Disability Act. When our architects did a cost estimate, and they're only doing a cost opinion, they are not the construction companies that really determine what they believe the cost is to do the job. They came up with $40 to $45 million in must do in order to improve the infrastructure and preserve the building. Then we started looking at general remodeling, modernizing classrooms, a new student commons area, modernized cafeteria, new CCC and academy space. These are two programs that we operate outside of at Central that are for our students with special needs. The CCC is a program for students who are 18 to 23, stay with us so they learn job skills and independence. Lockport Academy is our own alternative school. Rather than sending students out to private alternative schools, we keep them in our district to address their needs. New student collaboration spaces, and if we thought pie in the sky, if we had everything we wanted, a lot of glass and steel, new common spaces, remodeled cafeteria, our architects said that that would be about $55 to $70 million. So if you look at the whole conceptual presentation in September, infrastructure improvements, general remodeling, that cost was still less than building a new building. But our board felt it was too costly for you. And they sent DLA architects and us as administrators back to the drawing board, really to narrow down to this: the must-have infrastructure improvements, windows, roof, electric, plumbing, all of those Americans with Disability Act, the must-haves, which have to be done. But our board also felt that if we are doing those kind of renovations and tearing the building up, we also ought to modernize our classrooms. One of the most important things that I want to show you with some of these diagrams is also in that classroom modernization is reclaiming space that we are not using right now. We only use about 67% of the building. There are many spaces that we could reclaim as classrooms that right now are either locker rooms not being used, a pool that is occasionally used, auditorium space that is rarely used, and maintenance space that we could convert and use in a better way. We believe that within that 216,000 square feet, we can actually add 19% more classroom space. You might ask, why is that important? Well, one, it's important for efficiency, so that we're using all the space in the building. Two, it's important for education. Lockport Central was built 114 years ago, and it was built on many of the premises at the time in terms of education. It was built in stages, 1909, 1928, 1930, 1958. We are a long way away from the education methods, the teaching and learning, and the needs that students have to meet in order to meet the future. And we want to have a facility that also meets those needs. So let's take a look. This is an aerial view of Lockport Central, and you can see how it was built in modules. The very front facing that faces Jefferson Street was built in 1909. The very top of this was built in 1928, and strangely enough, if you followed our situation with our ceilings, this is the area where those ceilings are of concern, and the construction method that we are removing is of concern. Gym, 1930s, and if you go down all the way to the lower right and then a little bit to the left, you have the final addition, which took place in the 1950s. We really haven't done any kind of major renovation since. And right smack in the dab in the middle, you might see a cylinder that was also added into the courtyard in the 1950s. The conceptual plan, and one of the things I want to stress with what you're seeing on the screen is we did not order architectural plans. Architectural plans are time-consuming, they are expensive for the district to buy and commission. We decided going into a referendum that we would offer a concept, not spend taxpayer money on actual architectural plans that might never see the light of day or might have to be modified depending on your wishes. So this diagram is starting from the bottom up. In the final proposal, the $85 million proposal, we would keep the cafeteria really as is. It would be modernized with some paint, some flooring, some aesthetics, but we would also modernize the kitchen back there because that kitchen really hasn't been touched since the 1950s. But the idea of demolishing the auditorium, creating a giant atrium, that's an idea that our board set aside for a more modest proposal. Working our way up to the first floor, what we would try to do is reclaim some space. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's sort of a greenish area. That's all locker room area that we do not use right now. What we would propose, and the pool, we would propose taking a whole large section, that whole floor, turning it into classroom space to host the Lockport Academy and the CCC. If you look right below that, just on your right side, you'll see sort of a reddish area. That would be a fitness center to replace a maintenance area right now that isn't used as a classroom at all. What I'm trying to suggest is just areas that we would start to create, including all the way down by the auditorium, where we would do improvements to have a more secure entrance to the building than what we have at the front main entrance. As you walk your way up to the second floor, one of the things that you see, if you look at the lime green in the upper left, clustering all of our math classes together rather than having them spread out all over the building. Pulling our admin classroom areas together, including school counselors, deans, our school resource officer, into more modern and accessible offices. As we go up, you'll notice our science labs, and that is probably where we would start with general classroom remodeling. If you come on a tour, you will notice that our science classrooms are very cramped, very small for 28 to 30 learners. The electricity is in the ground rather than more modern applications of coming down from the ceiling. The lab tables are dated. All of that would be something that we'd renovate because every single freshman takes biology. If you go a little bit lower, kind of the light blue aqua, that's English, and putting those classrooms together. We have some ideas about how to use the auditorium, possibly to extend the port, but also using the stage, which we barely use anymore, and really the public isn't interested in using it, to create a multi-purpose room that many departments could use. Again, increasing that space within the building. And then finally, up on the very top floor, these are actually rooms we don't use very much, but I'm showing this to you because one of the most important components is there, and that's the roof. As you know, in your own home or in any structure, a roof is a key structural component that helps keep the entire building safe, sound, moisture-free, and temperature-controlled. I want to just show you very quickly some pictures. These are all vintage buildings that we have visited where the same age as Lockport Central, where our architects have worked in buildings like Lyons Township North, and where they've remodeled spaces and increased the size of those spaces for students. These are also buildings where they have put in new HVAC, new electric, new windows, all of which become part of the life of the building itself. I'm just going to move through these quickly just to kind of give you a sense of how a vintage building can still, in an exciting way, host modern learning. And I want to mention it because I think one of the things that's most important is that our board, going back to our demographic study, without a population growing or shrinking, our board still is very tied to the idea of a freshman center, a place where 7 different school districts, elementary school districts, come together and students all become freshmen together before going to a much larger place like Lockport East. A very important concept, a foundational concept. We have a lot of academic data that supports that idea as well. These are the type of learning spaces that we would propose even in a vintage building. More modern, more connected, and even offices for our staff and conference room where we can meet our parents. These are things that we really lack at the building currently. I want to show you just one picture where I think that we took that really mixes the concept well. This is the main entrance of Lyons Township North High School, about the same age, just a little bit younger than Central. You can see in this picture that the main entrance still maintains many of the features of a 1919, 1920 building. But if you look at the floor, you look at the glass, you look at the railings, it is modernized and just a bit more contemporary. It's a nice picture of what we're proposing in terms of renovation and preservation. As I come to a close and get to your questions, you might say, how in the world would you do this, Dr. McBride? And our plan has been to do this over a 5-year phase-in period, where we make the most out of our summers to do some of the major things that we need to do, and we move students around inside of Lockport Central to be working on different areas. In the summer, we're doing major infrastructure. We're doing heating and cooling. We're doing windows. We're doing the roof. In the school year, we're doing classroom remodeling once those areas have been finished in some of those major mechanical, life safety, Americans with Disability, electrical work. And then you do that over 5 years. This does propose that we've got to manage costs. One of the beauties of renovation is you have the building. In new construction, you've got to build the building. If you commit to a brand new building, you have to build it, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of what changes come, and regardless if the cost of that new building doesn't match what you ask the taxpayers. In our case, we can deal with the must-haves, the need-to-haves, the infrastructure of the building first, and then see what funds we have left over to handle other remodeling in the building. One important point in a bond referendum is if we ask you for a financing amount of $85 million, we cannot go above that $85 million. That is fixed, and that is almost you approving a budget for us. So we have to manage those costs over 5 years, no matter what. Just want to make a mention, just as I exit out and start dealing with your questions, a little update on Central and Lincoln Way North. Many of you know, November 1st, we had a ceiling collapse. November 6th, brought in forensic architects. Ultimately, their determination is that those ceiling systems collapsed because they're old, almost 100 years old. Many of you know that the board has decided that the 14 other classrooms that use that same ceiling construction, the board is going to keep the building closed until those are repaired as well. And we expect that the total repair of the demolition and the repair will take us all the way to about the end of this school year. So students will be at Lincoln Way North that entire time. But we were very fortunate that our sister district opened its doors to us, allowed us to come in. November 7th, the board decided we would go to Lincoln Way North, and November 15th, we moved in. Really, in many ways, renovation is already underway at Lockport Central. This week, bids will go out for the demolition of ceilings. Those will take a few weeks. They'll have to be board approved in February. We will begin that demolition with a successful bidder. Once those ceilings are removed, nobody's looked up into them since 1928. We are going to take a step and have a structural engineer come in and do a visual inspection because of that and do whatever they suggest we do in terms of repairs. Then we will have to bid out rebuilding those ceilings as well, and that probably will take us to about May or June, ultimately allowing us to set a date for when we return to Central. I think the important thing is student focus and really just asking you in this presentation what you can imagine with a freshman center where we have 8th graders coming to us from all over our 7-feeder district and what is possible for them in a historic building like Central that could have modernization that could last 50 to 70 years. Some really useful resources I'm going to leave up as I take the questions. One is our district website. Has so much information. 2, we have a whole page dedicated to Central updates. And then 3, finally, there is a tax calculator. If you take a recent tax bill, you open it up, you identify your assessed value, you can put that assessed value in, it will tell you exactly how your tax payments will increase if we have $85 million in bonds over 25 years. Thanks so much for being attentive and listening to me. I'm going to go to questions now and do the best job I can answering them. And like I said, any questions that are not answered, we will get them in a frequently asked questions. So I'm just going to turn to my panel and see what questions are out there.
Thanks to the people who are putting questions in the chat for you, Dr. McBride, and we're over here discussing like what's the best order also to give them to you in, but we've assured people that you will answer them all. So the first question is, you mentioned that only 50 to 60% of Central Campus is being used. The question from this person is why, and when was the last time the other 40% or so was used, and why was it stopped being used?
Yeah, that is a great question. We have facilities that I think the root of that is that for a very long time in its history, Lockport Central was a standalone high school building. It had an auditorium that at the time was state of the art. It had both athletic locker rooms and PE locker rooms because that's where all athletics were being completed in Lockport. But slowly over time, where we're at now, Lockport East grew and grew and grew to the model that we have now, where all of our athletics really are here at Lockport East. Most of our students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, almost 3,000 students are here at East. And our auditorium no longer was as appealing to people who would want to use it, either our own staff for productions or people who would want to rent it because it has some dated features. We no longer use the athletic classrooms, the athletic locker rooms that you would find underneath the gym. The pool we occasionally use, but it is not a modern pool when we have a very, very modern aquatic facility here. So really the answer is that so much shifted over here to Lockport East. The auditorium, the athletic locker rooms, the pool, all of that now is really unused space that we believe we can reclaim. Thanks, that's a great question.
Okay, one more question or a few more questions. The next one was, what will you do to guarantee the taxpayers won't be here again in the same situation in 5 to 10 years because there needs to be more renovations done?
That is a really good question. Any type of renovation project like this will begin with every kind of structural analysis, every type of examination of life safety, infrastructure, heating, cooling. The whole idea is let's replace these features now. Let's replace them now so that they have a life that is 50 to 70 years. Obviously, you can never say never. There are new structures, brand new buildings that occasionally have issues that no one ever anticipated. But right now, the best bet in order to preserve and add life to Central is take all of those systems that are legacy, a boiler system that heats the building that's 70 years old, an electrical system that's from the 1950s, a roof that hasn't been replaced since the 1980s, replace those through renovation, windows that haven't been replaced since the 50s, replace them, and try to head off any other kind of failure at the building, and then certainly add to the classroom space and add to the size of the classrooms so that they're modern, that they connect with students, that they're modern teaching and learning facilities. So the idea of doing a full renovation, not just a partial renovation. I really think that the difference is doing the full renovation versus only doing part. We believe, our architects believe, and it'd be great, on Wednesday night, our architects will be at the tour at 6:30, that doing the full renovation is the best way to head that off, that we're here in 5 to 10 years. I would suggest that given what we've seen in our facility study, in our recommendation, if we only do a much smaller, a piecemeal, partial renovation, much less than $85 million, that we will be back in 5 to 10 years because there's systems that we just won't have the finances to replace. One important thing I think that here to mention is oftentimes asked a question when we talk about these very large dollars, people ask, well, why didn't you save up money to address these things? One, the main reason why is because that's not permissible legally in the state of Illinois. We cannot, as a school district, just save. The idea is tax money comes in, we're supposed to be spending it. And also, with any of these kind of projects, new construction, major renovation, you, the voters, have to decide it. And that's the state law and the school code here in Illinois, that ultimately it's in your hands, and that's important. Another question.
Will the district also be providing funds from fund balances for the renovation project with the referendum bond sales funds?
Most of our fund balances, if you look at our funds, really about 80% of our fund balances go to the annual operation of our entire school district. The majority of the balances in our funds are cash reserves, and those cash reserves exist so that the district ever has an issue. A ceiling collapses in room 310 and we have to move to Lincoln Way North, that the district can withstand something like that without financial strain or financial stress. If there's a change in state funding, if suddenly the state changes evidence-based funding and we suddenly lose $3 million in funding that we expect every year, those fund balances are really earmarked for those purposes. That's why we're going to a finance model to handle something much, much bigger and much beyond what our fund balances and our operating budget is. So fund balances refer to the operating budget. We're asking for an increase in the debt service budget so that we can do a major project that's well beyond the annual funds that we have. Yeah, Dr. Green.
With the ceiling collapse, and Bob, you alluded to this in your presentation, but can you talk a little bit more about the testing that's being done inside the building? And what about more architectural and engineer research in the structure?
Great. That is really an excellent question. So the very first thing that we did, I was very pleased DLA architects on that morning of November 2nd were on site by 9 a.m. But the first thing we did is we hired WJE. And WJE is a forensic architecture firm. Basically what they do is when you have a situation like this, they're like the scientists of architecture. They go through and they examine, why did this happen? They've done a preliminary report. They've done a draft final report. We're still waiting for the draft, the final report because they want to be thorough, but we're really operating off of their findings. They asked us, do you want us just to analyze the ceilings that you're concerned about? And our board answered that we wanted every ceiling system in the entire building analyzed. We've looked up into literally every closet, the auditorium, the 2 gyms, every classroom, and really about 73% of the building has been found that those ceiling systems are intact. It is the 14 classrooms that have construction similar to the 3 coded red areas that we've already demolished and 2 hallways that we're looking to remove really as a preventative. WJE said, well, we set up our offices for 3 weeks in one of those classrooms that was coded orange, moderate risk. But we don't want to take that risk with our students. So that is a scan that we've already done. Another test that we'll be doing coming up is when we remove those ceilings, we'll have Pease and Borst, an associates, a structural engineering firm, come in and look up into those removed ceilings to see if there's anything that they recommend. Also, we've had to do air testing, asbestos testing. We have found that we have no loose particulate asbestos in any of the systems, any of the areas that we're planning on renovating, in the room that collapsed, which is very, very good news. The building does have what's called hard asbestos. That asbestos is mainly in flooring, and anytime we replace flooring, we do have to properly remove that asbestos. But that asbestos is only dangerous when it's broken up in construction. So those are all things that we do on a regular basis, and especially now, just to make sure that the building is solid and in good shape. Yeah, Jeanine Wheeler.
Dr. McBride, there's a question regarding the length of time required for the renovation. If it takes 6 years to complete this renovation, then why wouldn't it be better to build a new building?
That is a great question if it takes 6 years. There's a couple of things. I think time, cost, and taxes. Time. We are in a situation, in those 6 previous referendums, we asked the community about new construction. Obviously, we can't kind of have any kind of regrets and look over. If we had new buildings, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But right now, we have a situation where we have students going to school in another community, lucky enough to rent another building. We have 1,000 students who need a building in their community. Renovation allows us to do that work and be timely and put those students in a building in their own community. Cost. Right now, new construction is one of the most costly things that we can do. $145 million for a new freshman center, about $180 million for a brand new high school. There's not really anything in our demographic projection that suggests we need a new high school in terms of our population moving forward, but those costs would put a heavy, heavy tax burden on you, the taxpayer. I would just ask you to imagine if you go to our tax calculator and what 85 million would be, what would 145 million in a bond referendum, 180 million, what would that look like? Also in terms of time, New construction can run anywhere from 3 to 4 years. So we wouldn't be walking into any kind of new building for that period of time. And we would still have to do renovations to keep Central moving and open. So those would also have costs. Finally, I would add feasibility. There are 2 places that we can build a new facility. Our property out in Homer Glen and our property behind East Campus. Both have feasibility issues. They're not insurmountable, but they are serious impediments. Out in Homer Glen, we have a water and sewer situation that is just not clear. There is not currently improved infrastructure at that site. If you live in Homer Glen, you know to the east you have Illinois American Water, and there are citizen concerns about the high cost of water. If you live to the west, you know that Lockport services you, and the city of Lockport and the village of Homer Glen are in a conversation about what improvements need to be made. This building I'm standing in is the largest water and sewer user in all of Lockport, and we just can't invest in a place if we don't know the water and sewer future. Behind here at East Campus, we have water issues. We have a natural creek that runs through there. We have height and elevation issues. We'd have to protect the neighborhood that abuts us from any kind of water runoff. When in Porter Stadium we put in ProTurf, we had to do that with the retention pond that runs along 7th Avenue. And whenever it rains, that water runs off of Porter Stadium and into those retention ponds. So not insurmountable, not impossible, but adds a significant cost if we decided to build there as well. So those are all reasons why when we looked at those options, we turned back to what could be possible at Lockport Central. Any more questions?
Yeah, you were talking a lot about the costs in your answer to the last question, and this question asks, how much will the financing of the $85 million cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, any kind of financing, when you do a bond issue, any kind of financing, just for lay people's terms, interest, is built into that $85 million. The most important thing, I think, is the cost for you in whatever residence you're sitting in. And that's why on the screen right now, we do have the tax calculator. For our average household in our entire 65 square mile area, the cost will be $9.18 a month. But your house might be above that average, it might be below that average, and the best way to find out what it would cost you would be to go to the tax calculator, type in what the assessed value, not the appraised value, not what a real estate agent would tell you to list it at, which is usually much higher. But what has your property been assessed at? Type that number in. You'll get some instructions if you have any exemptions. Most people only have the homestead, the homeowner exemption in Illinois, but some people have other exemptions like the senior exemption or the senior freeze. And then it will generate for you what your cost will be in terms of contribution you would have to make those loan payments annually.
So keeping up with kind of the finance end of things, another question is, are there any plans to sell the land LTHS owns in Homer to help pay for our needed renovations?
That is such a great question. These are just outstanding questions. Presently, there are no plans. A concern that we have are 2 things. Obviously, such a large parcel of land would typically be sold to a housing developer or an industrial developer, for example, either industry there or homes. There are 2 things right now that don't make the land as attractive to buyers as it could be. One, as I mentioned before, the water and sewer uncertainty. Any new developer coming in there either for industrial reasons or home reasons would have that as a concern without clarity on that quite yet. The second reason is just development in Homer Glen. I know the village is working very hard to try to decide the development future of Homer Glen. Is it going to invest in subdivisions? Does it want to maintain green space? Would it be open to industrial development on that land? That's just not certain. So the land is not as attractive now as it might be in the future as the village gets those issues worked out. Thanks, Dr. Greenan.
To expedite the repairs, would it be wiser to close the school and complete all renovations in a shorter period of time? And then there's another similar question that just talks about the 5-year time frame to complete. wondering about the work with bids, and would the work begin right after the referendum vote?
Right, that is a great question. Now, you might say to yourself, wow, that ceiling collapsed in November 1st and things are just going out to bid now. It gives you a sense of how long things can take. So first, architectural plans to attack those ceilings really couldn't happen until our forensic architects gave us a report. It took them 3 weeks to test every single ceiling in Central Campus. It took them about another 3 to 4 weeks, well into December, almost winter break for us, to provide us with a preliminary final report to give us some guidance. It then took about 3 weeks, right up until about last week, for DLA architects to respond to that report, write bid specifications, create a bid that will go out tomorrow. That bidding period is typically 2 weeks. All bids have to be public and they have to be board approved. That will happen on February 20th, but that's just a demolition phase. Then the demolition will take place. Then we believe structural engineers will come in and do the visual inspection. Then we'll create new bid specifications for reinstalling ceilings. It gives you an idea of how long things can take just in the bidding, planning, and contingency phase of things. That's another reason why we're phasing this out over 5 years. Not only do we know that we can do renovations and preservation modularly, parts of the building, but we also know that it takes time, to be honest. If the referendum does pass, then we will start right away doing all the planning, all the permitting, all the prioritization, all the decision-making that needs to be done to try to make even this summer as worthwhile as possible. And if the referendum doesn't pass, then obviously we have to have a plan B to really focus in on what we do want to do at Central. I hope, Dr. Green, do you think I answered the question on the five-year
Yes,
cycle?
I believe
And I
so.
probably would add one last thing with the 5-year cycle. You know, the 5-year cycle is to do a couple things. One, manage the project, pace ourselves out and pace our financing out. Have it occur while students are here in their own community. Right now, we are blessed that we're at Lincoln Way North and we have that solution. That won't always be there. But students are spending a lot of time on the bus and they have a shorter school day. So it also allows us to have as normal school operations as possible. It isn't unusual. There are many, many districts that have renovated while school is in session. And we believe we can do that as well. Yeah, Dr. Green.
Dr. McBride, there's an ADA question with renovation.
Great.
And then basically, there's several parts to this. Will the renovation create a wheelchair accessible main entrance where will there be more than one entrance or exit that is barrier free and wheelchair accessible? And will we fix the ramps in the hallways?
That is a great question. And I'm just going to repeat it if you didn't hear it from Dr. Green. So will there be more than one ADA accessible entrance and the ramps? And I'm going to deal with the ramps separately so I can just describe to viewers what that is. The answer to that is yes. Right now we only have one ADA compliant entrance. That's door 15 on the south side of the building. Individuals can come into that and there's an elevator. It's a very old elevator. It's not a very efficient or a very quick elevator. The plan would be to replace that. But the plan would also be, with the ADA compliance, to put another elevator on the north side of the building. So there's another entrance that is ADA compliant and accessible to create ease moving up and down the 3 flights of that building and the basement, really, for that matter. The ramps that bathrooms. We do not have high ADA compliance in our bathrooms. People might say, well, why make the bathrooms bigger? One of the reasons to make them bigger is to make them safer, as I mentioned earlier, but also to make them more accessible so that all bathrooms are ADA accessible and safer. The ramps, interestingly enough, if you take a look at that aerial view that I had of Central, that section that was built in 1958 is higher than the 1909, 1928 section of the building. So if you're standing in those sections of the building and you want to get across to the 1958 section, there are inclines that you go up. There is just no doubt about it. That would be a very, very difficult challenge because literally the building is higher. We haven't found an architectural solution to that yet. There might have to be in the hallway solutions that we create where we don't remove the ramps, but we make it easier to move up those ramps for any individuals who need to do so. But that is a very tricky problem. We don't know why the 1958 School of the Future is just taller than the 1909 and 1928 section of the building. But it is something that we're working on trying to resolve. Yeah, Jeannie Wheeler, thank you.
Yes, Dr. McBride, are two campuses better for students' education?
Yeah, that's a great question. Two campuses versus putting all of the students in a 9 through 12 building. I would say that it is. I've worked over 35 years in both systems. I've worked in large township high schools where it's 9 through 12, where students who are 8th graders enter in the fall of their freshman year. Sometimes they're 14, 15 years old, and they are right in there with seniors who are 18 years old. The developmental differences are great. The opportunity to bring 7 feeder districts into a single building, the opportunity for Dr. Green and her staff to work with those students to become high school students, because they don't come in. They come in as 8th graders. They don't come in as high school students. To help them in a smaller environment become a class is a very, very powerful thing that is research-based. But also, we have academic proof of that. Every year, the state of Illinois asks us for a freshman on track to graduate report. Our report typically is that 97 to 98% of our students are on track to graduate on time. If you look at our graduation rate, you see that matched. Really, our graduation rate annually is about 98, 99%. Why does the state list it as 93%? They list it as 93% because those 18 to 23-year-olds that I told you about earlier who stay with us, the state almost counts them like they're dropouts. Even though they're supposed to stay with us, the state treats them as if though they didn't graduate on time. Last year, we just had a handful, I think about 5 or 6 students who didn't graduate with their class, and if we removed our 18 to 23-year-olds, you would see that we'd have about a 98, 99% graduation rate. So I think that speaks volumes, in terms of that preparation. Other questions?
This question just asks, will Central Campus be ready for incoming freshmen in the 24-25 school year?
Yeah, that is a great question. The answer to that is ostensibly yes. We know that the ceilings that are of concern will be repaired and will be replaced. Our board, like so many things in a renovation project, is taking a pause to try to understand if staying in another year at Lincoln Way North would have a financial benefit to the district and to you, and would have a construction benefit to the district and to you. My feeling about it is that I hear loud and clear from our 8th grade parents that they want their students in the community. They don't want their students on long bus rides. They don't want their students in a shorter school day. That weighs heavily on the board's mind as well. It's as important as what we can get done, as important as what we can say. We always plan for this project to be 5 years. But like with everything we're doing our due diligence right now just to take a look to see if there's any advantage. For me, we just couldn't keep students at Lincoln Way North if we can't realistically get something major done in the 18 months that we would have that opportunity. So we're looking at that. We're pausing just a moment right now where we can still consider that, but we absolutely know that families need an answer, and they need an answer, this coming winter, not, in June or July. We are aware of that, but we're trying to do our due diligence on all things related to this project. So great question.
This question, I'm going to phrase it just in her parentheses. It says, why can't our freshmen stay at Lincoln Way North indefinitely rather than renovate Central? Asking you to talk about why that is.
Yeah, that is a great question, that we use this as a model. Almost we become in perpetuity renters of Lincoln Way North. A couple of answers, I would say. One, I don't think Lincoln Way School District 210 would be able to do that. They someday might reopen that building. They someday might sell that to the state of Illinois or to a Division III college that's interested in that facility, and that would unload a debt burden that they have. But also, I think even more important is the ongoing cost to the district, and then the ongoing cost to students and to teachers. The fact of the matter right now is that students and teachers are spending quite a bit of time on buses. That's eroding, and taking away from instructional time. And we have students going to a facility that is not in our district and would never be in our district because state law would not allow it. We'd always be visitors, and our status would always be temporary, thus bringing it back home here and thinking about what's exciting and what's possible at Lockport Central. Yeah, Dr. Greenan, thank you.
Dr. McBride, earlier you provided a breakdown of the estimated cost of how much HVAC, roof, window repairs would cost, roughly $40 to $45 million. The latest question in the chat asks, is there a chance that the entire $85 million would cover that particular portion, leaving out classroom renovation? And then the follow-up question was, would that be then reason to have a new freshman center? Would that be more financially feasible?
Right, we don't have an estimate, and obviously this is just an estimate, right? Our architects did a very, very high estimate, 40 to 45 million on the infrastructure needs. So we don't believe that 85 million would be the total cost of infrastructure. We believe it would stay at 40 to 45 million. The question is, if we're already tearing up the building, should we tear up walls, pull out things, and just put the classrooms back the way that they were? Or should we improve them and take advantage of the fact that we have spaces that we've never used, create those as classrooms, turn athletic locker rooms into spaces that we can use for instruction and modern instruction, reclaim spaces that right now are sort of a maintenance junk area and make that a classroom? And if we're pulling all those things out, do we put those classrooms back together as modern classrooms with real improvements and bigger size, or do we just put them back the way that we found them? The committee that worked with our board suggested that we do the renovation. So at this point, we believe that the 85 million would cover both the infrastructure improvements and the general classroom remodeling. But obviously, the infrastructure improvements have to come first. We can't have integrity to that building if we don't do those infrastructure improvements. So the classroom improvements have to be prioritized as well. For example, any plan would go after the infrastructure improvements first. But very closely, what's the next highest priority set of classrooms? Really, our science classrooms. They need the most renovation. Every student takes it. They need modern science labs to function and to learn biology and with its importance in total education. Then we would be able to see, can we move to other areas? Can we provide a proper ADA accessible area for the CCC, for the Lockport Academy? Can we modernize other classrooms? So we would do it concurrently. I hope that answered the question. Yeah, Dr. Green.
Brian, would it be feasible for renovations to add classroom or other rooms above the courtyard in the center of the campus? This question, they stated that there looks to be a lot of usable space vertically above the courtyard circuit.
That is a great question. And I know we're at 8 o'clock, so we'll maybe take a few more questions and wrap up. We did look at that. When I gave you that figure at $115 million, the absolute most expensive, throw everything in, a new atrium, a new cafeteria, a demolished auditorium to build that. We also looked at what would it cost to put a roof over that courtyard and build that space in. That technology is very, very expensive. We found that would be the most expensive thing on the list, and our board decided to take that off the list in order to bring part of that effort to bring that cost down and get it closer to the must-do and the classroom rebuild, renovation, and remodeling. So that would be great. It would be amazing. We've seen a lot of school facilities that have that kind of covered courtyard and reclaimed as space, but it's an extremely, extremely expensive technology and building option. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
All right, Dr. McBride, you covered a bit of this about the current budget, and this question says that some people say that they pay enough and nothing would be approved. They believe that this could all come out of the current budget if LTHS just, quote unquote, tightens its belt. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, we have $85 million that exceeds our annual fund balances. The answer I would give, I always try to make it commonsensical. You know, for many of us who have tried to buy our homes through a mortgage, have tried to renovate our homes through home equity loans or other things, why did we do that? Was it because we were poor stewards of our funds? Was it because we spent unwisely? Was it because we weren't thoughtful? What I generally find is that very few of us, myself included, our whole community, on our average funds that we have available, can we purchase a home in cash? Can we save up enough money to add an addition? We generally finance it, and schools really are no different. We're financing simply because our annual revenue, our budget to operate the district, and then our cash reserves to insulate the district from any kind of calamity, to spend that out would put us in a very, very precarious position. It would put all of that money into a renovation. It would leave very little money left for the operating, the schooling of students, and it would leave no money for us to have contingencies. So much like you, if you've ever financed in your life, we finance so that we're paying as we go along and we can kind of protect our finances. I often, for 35 years, I've heard that people say you should have saved the money or you should have worked within your means. You should cut services to pay for this. What I would tell you is we couldn't cut enough services, we couldn't save enough money by law to raise the type of money that would properly renovate a facility like Central, and certainly not new construction. Much like you, financing is really the only option that the board has, and it's really the only sensible long-term option. The last time that we did bonds in 2017 to put an addition off on the back of East, we actually aggressively paid off that bond and interest, so aggressively that we had that paid off by 2020, 2021, 2022. Just had it paid off, and that was working within our means to lower that debt and pay the thing off as quickly as possible. We'll take one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Thanks so much for being patient.
What will happen if the renovation referendum doesn't pass?
That is a great question. Well, there's a couple different options. The first most important thing I would tell you is that in 2020, 2021, when we sat around the table with the board, I think our Board of Education came to a very important decision. They felt this is something you should decide. They wanted to put the question of Central in front of you and the extent to which you would like to see, one, it renovated and preserved at all. And then two, how much long-lasting renovation would you like to see? So our Board of Education believes it's your decision, ultimately. If you reject that, as the questioner asks, then the board will have to impanel us as administrators to come up with another direction. We will probably lay all sorts of options, and I certainly will be bringing together in the next couple of months a Citizens Advisory Council again. So if you're interested in that, please email me. We'll take anyone, literally, to answer these kind of questions. But if it doesn't pass, what options are there? You could put that ballot measure on the November ballot, on the November election, just the same measure. You could offer the community a new measure, see if the community does want new construction, either a freshman center or a brand new high school building, and take on that very large bond issue. You could do a very, very scaled down, only what is necessary bond issue that doesn't require voter approval, and do only the minimum at Lockport Central. That might come back to the viewer's question about where will we be in 5-10 years. I would suggest, for the past 20 years, we've been putting about $500,000 to $1 million into Central a year, and that is just a strategy that's not going to take us into the long haul. So a much smaller, doing only what we need to get by, will create a situation where we will have things down the line that we'll have to address, because we won't be doing that, full renovation, that answers the situation for a much longer period of time. So that is a great, great question. All of those are possible, and I hope to pull together a Citizens Advisory Council, begin considering those, come alongside the board if the referendum doesn't pass, and have a plan for how we're going to attack the situation. I am sorry that we are at 8 o'clock. You've devoted time that you cannot get back. I really appreciate you hanging in here, being engaged with us. I'd like to advertise just a few more events that are coming up. Wednesday night, the Central at 6:30 tour is with our architects. So if you're very interested in what they're thinking, what they're recommending, how they're approaching this project and doing cost opinions, it's a great time to be there and ask them those kind of detailed questions. It's also just a great time in general to walk the building. I would really encourage you to get on our website, look at the materials that are there about Central, but check out the tax calculator. Make it relevant to yourself and see what would this mean for you as a taxpayer. I'd also encourage you to talk to fellow citizens, talk to each other, talk to our board, come to our board meeting if you have a strong feeling for or a strong feeling against. Our job is just to do the best job we can at provide you information. Tonight you've helped so much because your questions have sharpened our thinking. And ultimately, what is it all about? I think you have the same goal that we have. That's providing the best school facilities we can for our students, not only for students today, but students in 10 years, not only for citizens of Lockport, Homer Glen, Lamont, Orland Park, and Crest Hill, but for future citizens down the line, people we don't even know. Final thought that I would leave you with at the core and at the heart of this is Central is central. One of the things we noticed in the past referendums is that location really mattered. It divided the community. People realized that if a new high school was built someplace, then signs might go up in one neighborhood saying, you get the new high school and you don't. And that really divided our community. I think the vision here is to have an excellent, vintage, historic building that every single future porter, no matter where they live, no matter what their zip code is, they get to enjoy it, they get to experience it, they get to launch off of and into high school from that historic, renovated, and preserved building. I think that's our board's vision in a nutshell. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. As always, all of us, the administrators who joined me tonight, I want to thank Dr. Lori Cristofero, Mrs. Angela Adolph, Dr. John Greenan, Dr. Carrie Green, and taking on the maternity leave for our Director of Public Relations, Jeanette Castillo, returning to us, Mrs. Janine Wheeler. Can't thank them enough. Our emails, our doors, us walking in the hallway, we're open, and our tours are open to you because our job, like I said, is to get you the best information to make a good decision. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.